Mr. Albert, on this matter, and then quickly, because I want us to go straight into this spare parts, ambulance spare parts matter. I'm thinking that if indeed it was the case that there's an encroacher on Parks and Gardens, it's Parks and Gardens land, and the minister acknowledges that there's an encroacher, there's no news of the encroacher, because encroaching is a crime, it's illegal. There's no news of this encroacher being arrested. Encroacher moves 2 containers to a land that he doesn't have legal claim to. And nothing happens. So I'll be asking a quick one on this.
You see, thank you very much. And greetings to my fellow panelists. I see a lawyer has run away to better climes where it's colder. When you're coming, bring us something back. Buy us tomatoes. Can you hear me?
Lawyer Matipebu?
I think it's muted.
No, it's not.
It's muted. Yeah, but bottom line is that our development processes are not catching up with where we are coming from and where we want to go. Land, real market values have jumped through the roof. Land has become a commodity, which it wasn't at the time when it was being acquired in large tranches for the institutions, for the educational institutions, for prisons, at that time, where was Accra? Indigenous Accra was along the coast. And even modern Accra was today Newtown. Right? Mm-hmm. Ridge and all those places were reserved for foreigners. Now, when we came into government, and that's the problem, the structure of government has been such that government has been babysitting all of us. There's a perception and assumption that if you are not in government wielding power, you don't have any capacity. And government is piloting us all forward whilst we look on helplessly. So you must look at the genesis of this problem and realize the extent and scale of abuse. And realize it cannot only be stopped by merely arresting the purported encroacher on the, what do you call it, that place.
But it sends a signal.
Yeah, but I'm coming. The signal should be a comprehensive policy, and that's where I agree with Okujetu when he says the lands minister should come forth, because it is his duty. Parks and Gardens happens to be under local government, but yes, overall, Lands Commission is under the supervision of the Ministry of Lands, and the duty to manage public lands is within that ministry's purview in terms of policy. Actual implementation rests with the Lands Commission. But let's look at it. How do we get to the point where we commercialize, we make land a commodity, and it's gotten away, it's being abused heavily? It's from the infilling policy. And this was part of the liberalization process in the late 80s into early 90s, when there was liberalization, the introduction, real introduction of liberal policies, because the World Bank and the IMF insisted that the government had to liberalize. In liberalizing going forward, government then decides that as part of divestiture, there was divestiture in the 80s, late 80s, divestiture, which resulted in the beginning of the land grab, because most of the divested areas had large tracts of land. You remember the hotel in that area? The Lands Commission area, Star Hotel. Do you remember Star Hotel? Okujetu, do you remember Star Hotel? You remember that it was turned into private residences as part of divestiture? Because somebody acquired it, a Ghanaian acquired it, a member of the government. It was internally sold. A member of the government acquired it. Even later there was a problem, and it turned out that late President Rawlings's, the current then First Lady, now former First Lady, Kwedu Ajimai Rawlings, had gone into partnership with some private investors, and they had acquired the land, and there was a struggle between the private investors and her later on parts of the land, and that's how come they never finished developing that place. But you had a situation where divestiture implementation led to insider dealing cronyism, insider trading, and then the marketization, the commercialization of land came up. And from there, we got to the point where we talked about infilling, the infilling policy, where private developers were invited to take over large, you know, the colonial master used to put bungalows on 1 acre lots of land. Huge places with empty spaces. Some of the bungalows were rotten and otherwise. So government decided then, under the Rawlings administration, that it was important to redevelop areas and give more civil servants new housing. So private investors were brought in, developed this, and the quid pro quo was that give us another set of houses so that instead of paying us for this, you
rather build houses.
So in the beginning, it appeared as if it was working well because I recollect that I even represented a client in one of those transactions way back where he got 4 acres of government bungalows and built several flats and high-rises for the use of the government elsewhere. But then, as we speak, it has been totally abused to the extent that they've even forgotten about the infilling policy. They're simply walking in and taking over properties, demolishing government left, right, center, and it has become a source of major corruption in this country, acquiring government lands. Because those properties, the difficulty is that in the infilling policy, the lands are given away virtually cheap. They are not given away at market price. So if you're a lucky beneficiary, you make a major profit immediately. I mean, if you acquire prime land in rate at, say, 500,000 cedis, and you're able to sell it for $4.5 million or $1.5 million or $3 million, you can imagine. So access to this market has been corrupted and politicized heavily. And also because there isn't any institutional backing or accountability measures. But the way I want to go is to look forward. Because yes, the lands are vested in the president for all of us. What do we do with them? Because it's inevitable that as population grows, as needs grow, we have to evolve. So how are we evolving? So it's obvious that we are evolving in the wrong direction. How do we structure the evolution so that it is responsive to the needs of the majority rather than beneficial to the few who are politically connected and who have access to resources that are way beyond the rest of us? Because if it is government policy, if it's public property held in trust by government, the government must account for that trust. And the only way the government must account for that trust is to build structures, rules, regulations that will give all the population reasonable access. And if they are being sold, that the government will benefit from the sales. So I think that the reinvestment may be necessary, but in terms of pricing and access, they must be transparent. How come somebody puts a container on Parks and Gardens land and we can't find him anymore? If it had been transparent and he had acquired it effectively at market prices, then he would not be afraid of running away. And there's everything to be said for relocating it, because at that time, that was not Accra, that was a village. That's the point I started by making, that Accra was limited at the time, these large tracts of land. The prisons area is a barracks. If you want to relocate the barracks to another place, which is more conducive to the activities of that, you do it transparently. You get market pricing for it, and then you secure that property in another place where it will even aid development.
Great.
Because, let me learn. It's very important we resolve this matter once and for all. There's so much corruption going on that if we don't deal with these matters in a more constructive way and simply scream and yell that there is corruption, it's not enough. For example, the military lands, Burma Camp, that we've opened up with the brand new roads and all that, the Che Homes area and all that. What is happening to those lands? Are those lands free lands? Are they government lands? Who is exploiting those lands and benefiting from those lands? If Burma camp is in a place where now we want to develop into residential properties. What do? We market their land transparently. And we use the money, which is market value money, to rebuild the barracks in my village, Sechetmasi. As soon as you put Burma camp in Sechetmasi, you've achieved two things. You immediately expand the footprint of the state, and at the same time, you develop Sechetmasi.
Right.
Because the facilities you locate in Sechetmasi are such that you have no way of the place not becoming, because food business will grow, services to service the soldiers, accommodation, everything, training, everything will grow. So for me, it is time government accepted that the current process, the infilling policy, is being abused. And it's being abused for the benefit of politicians who are connected to power. And it's not just about one regime. It's a long-standing problem. And one screams, perhaps, when there's no access to it. But no government will be immune to this if structures are not in place. So my first structure is that let us assess and put in place a market pricing, a transparent market pricing process. In the belief that when you have real prices, you can do a transition. And the transition will bring value to the state through creating jobs and development elsewhere. Well, you lose that money to relocate. Then that is where we will all grow. Look at school lands. Look at school lands. Some schools, very soon you will find that they have nowhere to turn around because their lands are being taken over and Look, AMA, they don't even know where their bungalows are. KMA, STMA, all these metropolitan assemblies, the properties that were developed for them in the times they were set up, they have bungalows, they have all, because they were management institutions for the cities, so they were well set up. You will find that the staff themselves don't know where the properties they are. And yet individuals who have worked in there, Cocoa Board, you'll be shocked at Cocoa Board lands, Cocoa Board bungalows, Cocoa Board properties, estates that are being taken over by private people simply because they live there, they've been part of the process for a long time, they know where the thing is, but Cocoa Board itself doesn't even know. So it goes down to records as well. The way we are not keeping records in this country. And we are deliberately refusing to keep good records because we benefit from the lack of records.
And that's why that directive to the Minister for Lands to provide the records of state lands is extremely important. Extremely. And I got a message, it says, Alfred, please find out if some local Black is aware that Justice Honyanuga's residence has also been demolished, one around the American Embassy area. Is this true?
Yes, it's true. Justice Honyanuga's residence and 12 others. There are 13 bungalows that have been demolished in that enclave. The private developers are taking over.
The demolitions will continue as long as there is no clarity. Demolitions.
And let me quickly really support what the Honorable Babia Samoa has said about a registry of assets. That's why if you look at our proposed public asset protection bill at section 8, we are talking about a registry of assets. And we are saying that we would like this bill, when it is passed, to include, quote, a registry of all state assets shall be created and published on a government website, regularly updated in the spirit of transparency and public accountability. The State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA, is mandated to coordinate with all state institutions to compile and publish all state assets. If there's transparency and we have this registry, and he's very right. I mean, even Works and Housing, ask them today, how many bungalows are under your care? They can't tell you.
Okay,
Thank
you.
And let's give me 2 minutes.
No, in a minute.
Leadership. Are you asking a question? Just give me 2 minutes.
In a minute.
Leadership
1 minute.
is a function of competence, direction, and growth. This policy need not be negative on the country because it is actually an instrument for social development and growth. Because if you want to change the user of underutilized lands in the center of Accra, you can transfer the benefits of that usage elsewhere outside Accra. True. You understand? It's like the National Cathedral. There were those who were saying that it should have been built either in Adenta on the civil aviation lands there or in Dodua.
The place that they're trying to build the water park.
Yeah. That place. That is over 600 acres of lands that belong.
And that will have avoided all the demolitions.
Yes, all that went.
Look at the prime properties we demolished.
Expand the
Judges
footprint of development.
Judicial Training Institute, Scholarship Secretariat, Passport Head Office, Mali Ambassador's Residence, Waterstone Realty Apartment Complex. All of this, including Comsys IT, all demolished. Some are in court demanding compensation. Rightfully so. Yes. So when we talk about $58 million for National Cathedral, that one is just the taxpayer funds that went into the hole, digging the pit, the world's most expensive pit. We do not add the compensation for all of this, including the Shraj Commissioner's bungalows that were demolished.
No,
it's a tall list. Let me give you the list. Let me give you the list. Judges' bungalows, one. There are about 15 of them, all demolished in that enclave.
The National Cathedral area.
Then the celebrated Judicial Training Institute, where Commonwealth judges, they come for capacity building and all of that. It was also demolished. That's two. Scholarship Secretariat was also demolished. And that is such a building that elsewhere it will be preserved. Because the kind of people, the kind of people who have gone through government scholarships, become international grades and all of that, is gone, it's demolished. Then the Passport Head Office, demolished. We had to approve funds in Parliament, over 10 million cedis for a replacement.
That's the new
near GIJ.
GIJ.
So the Passport Head Office was demolished. Then the Malian Ambassador's Residence, also demolished. They have now found some land for him at airport. He's waiting for full compensation. Can you believe that? Mali Ambassador's Residence, demolished. Then bungalows belonging to Shraj, demolished. Then Comsys IT firm, their headquarters, was also in that enclave, demolished. Then there was an apartment complex known as the Waterstone Realty apartment complex. There's created jobs and all of that. They are in court, demanding about $6 million in compensation. So by the time you add all of that, the compensation, the replacement of all these buildings. Do you know that the judges, we had to rent for them in cantonments, and we started new construction for them. Look, the way even the eviction was done, it was so crudely done that we lost an appeal court judge who was asking for just a few days because the wife had gone through surgery. Justice Said, he resigned. It was a loss to Ghana, because he had been awarded by the GBA not too long ago as the most, transparent judge in terms of integrity and all of that. We lost him. He was so upset that why? Why should I be so crudely evicted? No ample notice for National Cathedral, which has become,
So this is the list. That same Parks and Gardens land,
it's going to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars to replace all these structures and to compensate all these people.
Do we realize that
a moment of madness?
The new Russian embassy.
What?
Yeah.
The new Russian embassy.
Yeah.
Is it on Parks and Gardens land?
No, it's just by it.
Is it on it?
No.
Was that land unencumbered?
Yeah, it was.
It was government land?
Yes.
Okay. So it goes to reinforce the fact that there will be development. Government land within metropolitan Accra, the mega city of Accra, will have to be rezoned properly. And therefore, if you are going to give away Parks and Gardens land for rezoning purposes, there must be market value. I just want to insist that we must have processes and structures for this transition, because the transition is inevitable. Indeed. But if we pretend that we can keep those lands as they are, they will always be stealing.
But there I disagree. There are some that ought to be preserved.
But that's part of the transition.
Because the capital, despite the
it's
economic
like Central
growth
Park,
and all
New York
of that.
Central Park.
Yes.
They have a huge center of the city.
You go to New York, you go to London, they have Hyde Park
that is why,
at the center of London.
That is why
there's nothing wrong in preserving.
It's not wrong.
A green space.
Let me land.
Do you know Achimota Forest?
Let me land.
They are back at selling portions.
Let me land.
Achimota Forest.
Let me land. If you are preserving, it's part of the transition. Well, we have to be certain about the portions we are preserving and not touching.
Exactly.
Because if you don't have a clear policy about the ones you are preserving, because the city must breathe. The city breathes through its parks. So you preserve Achimota Forest, you preserve land, parks and gardens, you preserve this place. But where are the others? What if there's a bungalow of 1 acre? with a small decrepit building on it, it may be difficult to preserve. But who gets access to it?
Exactly.
Faceless people cannot acquire it for a very small amount of money to the state and benefit heavily in the open market at the expense of the rest of us. So there must be a clear policy that elicits market value for this transition, for the state.
For the state.
And a relocation which is beneficial in the sense of developing other less developed parts of the country.